Good afternoon and welcome to the first of three community forums to meet finalists for the Amherst Regional Middle School position. I am Doreen Cunningham, the Assistant Superintendent of Diversity, Equity, and Human Resources. This virtual platform that you are viewing from YouTube has a chat feature where you are able to submit questions for candidate response. Questions were also submitted via email. We will get to as many as possible during the allotted time. We ask that communication via chat follow the norms that we would follow if we were in person, meaning that we will use appropriate language and be respectful with our communication. Also, this is a reminder that the sessions are being videotaped. Each candidate will begin by giving a brief bio and sharing why they believe that they are the best candidate for this position and why they are interested in Amherst schools. We will begin today with Diego Sharon. So, Mr. Sharon, please tell us about yourself and why you believe that you are the best candidate for this position and why Amherst schools.
Thank you, Doreen, and welcome to all of you who are watching from your computers at home. First of all, I'd like to just acknowledge the awkwardness. Certainly when I began this process in pursuit of this position, I didn't anticipate that we would be doing this virtually. So I can't see any of you and you can see me, but I'm just putting that out there. My name is Diego Sharon. I have been an educator for over 25 years, about 18 of those as a classroom teacher, and the rest of them in various forms of administrative work. During those years, I have developed and had the opportunity to have a broad range of experiences, not only in different school settings and in different communities, but also in different parts of the world. I had the great pleasure of working in South America and in Thailand to help develop, as part of a team, humanitarian educational projects. That underscores my commitment to social equity as a way to work as schools as a vehicle for social equity. And I think that's a really important part of my career and my work and my passion. Throughout my time as an educator, I've had the opportunity to develop a great many programs, and I found that social equity is always at the forefront of those. My attraction to Amherst and my profound belief that I am the best candidate for this goes beyond my love of Amherst, which I've developed over the past year, and in particular of Amherst Middle School, which I've developed the past year as the Dean of Students. I have a genuine regard for the professionalism and of the staff and faculty, and also a high regard for the students and their striving as well. I believe that I'm the best candidate because those experiences have given me a real insight into what the issues at play are, some of the challenges that we collectively as a community face, and as a professional community in particular, at looking at the school, and particularly in a time of tremendous change. I think it's beneficial to have someone who has relationships established with students and with staff alike, and who has the capacity and ability to call upon and leverage those relationships in order to build more trust and to develop clear goals and a teamwork orientation towards working on those. So that's why I feel I'm the best candidate, besides my broad experience, my connection to the community.
Thank you. Please tell us, what do you like about middle school students?
That's a great question. I have worked at all levels. I've worked in elementary schools. I've worked in middle schools. I've worked in high schools, and I've even taught college level courses for educators. And the thing I like and really appreciate about middle school, well, there are many of them, but I think the primary thing is that it is a really critical period in the life and the biography of students. And it's a time when students can be supported in a way that really helps them to develop resiliencies that can carry them through not only the rest of their schooling experience, but also the rest of their lives. And it's a really critical period for the opportunity to affirm students of all backgrounds and to really create a culture that teaches all of us not only to respect ourselves and to strive, but also to respect others and to really find benefit and growth in those differences that we encounter at that age. And developmentally, I think it's a really important time to help students develop a picture of what it is to be not only a leader and an educator, but also just a person of integrity, and modeling that for them, with them, is a really important part of why I enjoy that, because I feel that they're very responsive, and they're in certain ways aching for that kind of model in their lives, in their schools, in their communities, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about working with middle school students. I also find them to be tremendously creative. It's a time when they retain some of the goofiness, if you will, of being a child, but they're also developing their critical thinking capacities that will become more refined as their life progresses. And so, in that regard, it's a very powerful and potentially impactful time for them to develop themselves, and that's what I really love about working with middle school students.
Thank you. If you are chosen to become the next principal of the middle school,
Yeah.
how will you support students with mental health disorders?
I think one of the things that I always focus on not only as an educator, but specifically as an educational leader, is the development of a culture that's supportive to all individuals. And I think one of the things that's a particular challenge is working in a community with so many people, and recognizing that there are different needs that everyone brings with them. And so I think first and foremost, developing and working really hard to develop a culture that is supportive of all students and their needs is really important. That's particularly true of our most vulnerable students, and I think that speaks to your question. The other thing I think is really important is to focus and to focus on relationships. My experience is that relationships that students develop with adults and with one another are really one of the most important vehicles for learning in a middle school setting. And so to really work on supporting the development of relationships through a purposeful engagement of culture, and to really work on developing mechanisms that allow those relationships to shape how we interact with one another. I was just having a conversation with a colleague who's a administrator as well, and we were talking about the specific social emotional needs that are present for students during this time of so much uncertainty. And in talking about it, we really were affirming this idea of relationships being that vehicle. We talked about teachers who are adapting to this new online learning environment and creating leadership and lessons that none of us thought were possible before this. And so being able to focus on those opportunities, being able to engage students, and really being able to deepen relationships are the things that I find inspiring and that can serve all students, particularly the students that you mentioned.
Thank you.
You're
How
welcome.
will you close the equity gap for students?
I think that's one of the things that I feel is really important about my intentions and my desire to take this position on at Amherst. I think one of the challenges that Amherst Middle School in particular faces is that there doesn't seem, from my experience, to have been in place over an extended amount of time very clear goals around this particular issue or very clear understandings. So my intention is to embody the role not only of school leader, but also of lead learner, and really to support the development of clear and transparent understandings about what those issues actually are, what they look like, how they manifest, and to really have clear ideas about what we as a community, as a professional community in particular, but also as a community, as a whole community, are doing to address these. And I think it's a situation where it's really important to be able to talk the walk, in the sense that it's one thing to know what we're doing, but to have everyone in the building be able to talk about what we're doing and use the same language and have clarity about what those things are is really important. And it's my goal and my intention to really work as a team leader, but also as a lead learner, to identify the issues in play, particularly around social equity, and to name them, and to engage in a few initiatives, because I think sometimes we can get muddled with too many, a few very purposeful initiatives to address this particular goal, and to revisit them in a team, as a team, regularly, and to report out to the community about the progress, and to really be consequent with communication, to be transparent with communication, and to really have this goal of developing social equity and closing that gap be a critical part of what we address in this team setting. Really bringing on the expertise that we have in the building and engaging it, and having a very intentional approach to doing that. And so I think one of the things that can be very frustrating about working with goals like this, which are huge and are multifaceted, is that the change is incremental. But the reality is that incremental change is the only change that's available to us. And so if we don't keep our eyes on the prize of this change and continue to report out and develop a movement around it, then I think we run the risk of losing the thread. And I think, to be quite honest, one of the things that I've seen here is that there hasn't been that continuity or clarity of action on a consistent basis. And so I would hope to bring that, and I would hope to bring that in a way that allows us to work on this goal over many years, with myself guiding and supporting that, again, not only as a school leader, but also as a lead learner, so that I could also model the kind of engagement and vulnerability that is an important part for all of us as educators to work on as we grapple with this difficult issue.
Thank you. What is your plan of action to ensure that English language learners and students with special needs make significant progress?
That's again, that's a great question, and I think it's important to realize that whether we're talking about an achievement gap, or we're talking about English language learners, or regardless of what population we're talking about, what we're seeing is that in the absence of a really comprehensive and cohesive plan of action, what we're seeing is that we're not continuing through with a thorough and well thought out process of school improvement. And so I would assert that in the presence of this kind of cohesive plan, this would be an improvement for all students. And so one of the things that I think is difficult to recognize sometimes is that the beneficial things that are going to be happening need to be things that are seen school-wide as having the effect of benefiting all students. And every single adult in the building needs to be on that same page. And that kind of teamwork and that kind of cohesion is critical to developing change and success in a school setting. And in the absence of that, you might have very good things happening in different parts of the school, but if they're not happening in all parts of the school, then effectively what you're doing is you're having 1 hour of a student's day be supporting growth, or a couple hours of the student day supporting growth. But in the absence of those things being manifest in every single part of the student's day, what you have is students having to learn different systems, students having to learn different skills, and instead of learning similar skills or the same skills that will benefit them in their math class, in their science class, in their history class, in their art class, in their PE class, etc. And so my plan of action is to work collaboratively with a group of teachers and educators in the building who have a strong sense and a strong impulse to understand these ideas and to develop to develop tools or to use tools that are available to us in order to make sure that equity at all levels is something that we're bringing. And so whether we're talking about the achievement gap with ELL students or with any other group of students, this should be a concerted effort that's happening throughout the building. And our capacity to be able to understand what those solutions are collectively and to agree upon them and to implement them and to speak with not only with cohesion, but also with clarity and with transparency about our progress along that work is, I think, what I would call my plan. So I don't have a plan that's in place because I believe very much in the idea that every single school community has a plan that is the ideal fit for that. And my goal is to work to develop that plan in concert with the tremendous professionalism and expertise that already exists in the building, and to work to implement that plan in a way that is, like I said, cohesive, but also in a way that allows all students to understand and clearly what are the skills that we're suggesting will help them and engage them in success. And of course, part of that is revisiting the work and revisiting it in a way that that allows all of us to be able to understand where our strengths are manifesting and what adjustments we need to be making in real time to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the students.
Thank you. With change in administration comes changes in policy, procedures, and methodologies. How do you plan to streamline existing systems and utilize staff feedback when implementing new initiatives?
One of the things that I have experienced in many places is that when there is a change in administration, and particularly when there is change in administration that happens regularly, it can become very confusing because if a group of teachers were working very hard and purposefully 5 years ago to engage a practice that was being supported by leadership, and they did a very good job of that, and then 2 years later, it's a whole different system. I think that can be very dangerous for the ability of a school to continually adapt. And certainly there has been a lot of change at Amherst Middle School. I believe that it's really important to develop a collaborative and clear approach to addressing the identified issues that are present in the community as a team, and to very clearly state what those are, not only to ourselves consistently and to one another consistently, but also to the community, and to have those uh, goals and those methods engage and become part of what we talk about, how we communicate to each other, and what our expectations are for one another as professionals in the school building. And so, my goal for uh, implementing my leadership in the school isn't to throw out everything that came before and to say this is my system, but to really have open and and trusting dialogues with professional stakeholders in the school, whether they be parents or teachers or the para staff or whoever, and really identify what are the things that are working, what are the things that we see as continuing to be of benefit uh, to students, and what are the things that we don't see. And so my goal would be in that setting to be able to determine what these are and to work with fidelity in order to make sure that those are things that are happening across the board. And the positive attributes of that is that if those are widely held and widely understood um, solutions that are being proposed to widely held and widely understood problems, and those are agreed upon by all the professionals and all the teachers in the building, then it gives us all the opportunity to engage in continual renewal of what our goals are and what our roles are within those goals, and also to work at addressing them in a way that is of benefit, regardless of the leadership that is or isn't in place. It would be my goal to become the principal and to be a longstanding principal at the middle school. But in the event that I was principal and something happened and I wasn't there 5 years later, my hope would be that those goals would have been taken up by enough people in the building and understood to be uh, um, positive and proactive and successful ways to work at our collective goals, that they would continue to be worked on regardless of who sat in the principal's office.
Thank you. What is your experience with performing arts departments, and what vision do you have for the role of performing arts in the middle school?
That's a great question. I think one of the really powerful things about the arts in general and performing arts in particular is that they give students an avenue and an opportunity to try different things on. I myself am an artist. I'm a mediocre musician and someone who has worked for years to become a painter, and so I really value the role of art, and I really value the opportunities that can happen from that kind of outside the box thinking that is available to us when we engage that side of our brain that asks us to be creative and to not be self-critical. And I think that practice in and of itself of employing one's creativity and to do it in a way that is supported by peers and engaged in collectively by peers and adults is a really powerful model for the kinds of successes in community that I feel really mark and can have a long-lasting impact on not only who we are, but who we are in relation to our world and others. So in terms of supporting the performing arts, I think it's really important that arts be brought to students in a way that they can be appropriately managed. I think if someone has a drama class or someone has a chorus class, and the way that it's done is such that that the classroom management is the most critical piece of the success of that, you're setting yourself up for a lot of real challenges, because of course being in a vulnerable space in a community of young people is not a comfortable space for a lot of middle school students. So it has to feel safe. If I'm going to elevate my voice and sing, I want to feel that I'm not going to be made fun of. If I'm going to take on a certain role as a character and maybe act different than I normally would, and have that witnessed by a group of my peers, I want to make sure that that's recognized as something that is an attempt at art, not as something that should be targeted or singled out. And so I think it's really critical for the integrity of performing arts in particular, that it be done in such a way that's supported. I'm sorry, and that really becomes that safe space for young people who are developing themselves, not only as thinkers and as doers, but also as people who whole human beings who are going to be trying different things on, and elaborating themselves, and hopefully becoming more and more themselves as time passes. I think that opportunity to feel safe in a performing arts space is absolutely, and can be absolutely, transformative. And I don't mean only to an individual, but also to a community. And so I you know I feel like I have a very strong value for the arts. Um, I, and I, as a parent, I have always made sure that my kids are involved in the arts. And one of the first things that I ask students, when I would meet them in my role as dean at Amherst Middle School, is I would ask them, "Hey, what do you like to do? Do you play an instrument? Do you like to draw?" And I actually use the arts quite a bit. There were various different art projects that I engaged in with students at different times. I did painting with some students. I always marveled at what it is, and the power of having a young person make something beautiful, genuinely beautiful, and to watch the pride that creates in them, and to watch how empowering those actions can be. And so I think I would like to work to further develop the role of performing arts at Amherst Middle School, and to have that be an important part of what everyone does at the school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If we have a period of time next year when we have to rotate between in-person and online instruction, what will you do to ensure that students are engaged in their learning? And what will you do to ensure that their social emotional well-being is being taken care of or addressed?
Yeah, that's a really important question to be thinking about right now. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that all of us collectively, who are educators, but also who are parents at home with our kids, are engaging this question for the very first time. When people say these are unprecedented times, they're not kidding. I have a daughter who's graduating from an architecture program next weekend, and there's no graduation. There's nothing really momentous to demark this tremendous work that she's been committing herself to for a number of years. And so I think this question of how we support students through this has a lot to do with demonstrating to them our willingness to work hard at being resilient, being creative, being thoughtful, and being purposeful in these times. Unfortunately, there are students who have more natural or socialized capacities for this, and there are students who have more abilities and supports for these things. And so I think what's really important to develop is in a school community the systems that are responsive, the systems that are proactive, and the systems that are beneficial in order to help students through this difficult time. Um, I can't predict what's going to happen uh, over the following school year because there are so many variables that are taking place in our community and in this nation and world at this time that will have a very strong impact on that. I think we're all seeing that. But as a school leader, what I would guarantee is that I would roll up my sleeves and work very hard with a group of concerned and engaged educators in order to make sure that all students were not only being given the tools that they need in order to be successful, but also the support from people, whether that means material things. I know the district has worked very hard to make sure that every student has access not only to a computer but also to a connection to the internet. And I'm very proud of the work that's happened at the district level to ensure that. And what that creates is an onus for us as educators to be involved in the day-to-day lives of all the students to the extent that they need, but also to the extent that's possible. And a lot of that has to do with creativity. I've been very impressed and very touched by the kinds of work that I see teachers doing and offering, and the opportunities for students to bring themselves to the classroom experience, and even to see each other in the quote unquote classroom, the virtual classroom, in a way that is affirming of their humanity and fun as well. And I think those things are and can be a part of what we're bringing to the classroom. And again, the more we allow students to be open, to be vulnerable in those settings, that's going to enable learning. And I think the other piece is to, like I said, develop those systems that are in support of students. We continue to meet as a school in various ways through this whole situation, and part of that is to ensure that there are students who aren't being left behind. And I know that I, as well as others, have done a lot of work over the past few weeks to reach out to students and their families who are not seeing involved in learning as much as we'd like, or not seeing them present in the classrooms or the synchronous opportunities to meet up with other students. And sometimes those communications end up giving us the opportunity to be creative and about developing systems or adapting our systems to support parents and families and students who have needs that are outside of the most typical kinds of needs that we're seeing. And so I think it's important to remain flexible, to be creative, and to be diligent and bring our will to this work, particularly now because there are no there aren't education departments that have been teaching us how to teach in this environment. It's really about us as professionals bringing our skills and again our will to this new work.
Thank you. What are your
Dorian, I just wanted to add, there are some questions that I'm seeing here. Would it be appropriate for me to read those, or are those?
We're going to get to them. We're going to.
Okay.
I see them. We're going to get to them soon.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure we didn't leave any out.
Mm-hmm. So, what are your fundamental beliefs as to what instruction should look like at the middle school level?
Yeah, I think my fundamental belief is that instruction should be responsive, and I think that responsive instruction looks different in different settings. I have taught in a lot of different schools, and as a teacher, I have always taught differently because I have a different group of students in front of me. I even when I'm teaching at a school and my morning class, they're going to be different than a class that I might have learning the exact same thing in the afternoon. And so I always really value the role or I should say the value of being responsive to the students that you have in front of you. And so any I think any preset ideas that one has about what a classroom should look, sound, or feel like actually limit our ability to be responsive. And so I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to evade that question because I think it's a good question. But I do think that within a particular school, there could be agreed upon norms about how we're teaching certain things or the skills that we see as being most beneficial and wanting to have those in place in across the curriculum in various classroom settings and things like that. But again, I think those are elaborated in dialogue and they're and professional dialogue with teachers who are being responsive to the real needs of their students, and within that having the flexibility to acknowledge that there are different strengths that are present in each of our students. And so I think the most important thing is that classrooms are responsive to the needs of their students, and that teachers are supported in being responsive to those needs in ways that enable learning by all students.
Thank you. What is your view about discipline in the middle school? In your response, please address issues such as cell phone use, hallway norms, and expectations around kindness.
Kindness is an undervalued trait sometimes, oftentimes I would say, and I think kindness is one of the things that any student who's had a conversation with me over this past year may have heard me ask if they felt they were being kind when they engage in a particular action. And the reason I say that is because I think it touches something very human in all of us when we experience kindness from another person. That being said, I also know that and particularly having been the dean over this past year, there were many times when students were acting in ways that were perceived as being unkind, and in many of those cases they were actually being unkind, and I also admit that can be a very subjective thing based on people's experiences and people's perceptions. And so it's a very complicated picture, but I do believe strongly that middle school is a time for learning many different kinds of things. And one of the things that we learn in middle school is how to behave in a way that's productive and appropriate and also kind in various settings. And it's also a time when there are increased freedoms that students are coming upon. And so I think it's very important to be proactively instructive. I think it's very important to clearly state the expectations for behavior. And I think it's also very important to work in a way that allows discipline to be instructive and not purely punitive. In my role as Dean of Students, I had the opportunity to work with teachers in developing ways that students could be restorative in the way that they redressed actions that they engaged in that may have been unkind or may have detracted from the learning environment of others or whatever. And that wasn't always easy. for a number of reasons. But I think it's really important to have as the fundamentals that that middle school is a place for learning. Uh, Learning includes not only the facts that we learn and the skills that we learn, but it also learns how we behave in different settings. And that ability that I have, and that all of us as adults develop to be able to switch our behavior uh, and behave differently in different social situations is something that doesn't isn't instinctual. It's something we all have to learn, and I think middle school is a place to learn that and to develop ways to help students see that, to develop responses to students' behavior that are appropriate, clear, and fair, but also instructive. I think is a really important part of doing that, and to the extent that we can, as a professional community, develop agreement about what those goals are, uh, and what the appropriateness is related to cell phone use, to behavior in the hallways, and to really clearly state those expectations and to be really consistent and thorough about implementing those, and supporting not only students but also teachers and all adults in having that classroom, that hallway space, those all the spaces in the middle school be part of what uh, uh, you know what is our learning environment is a really important part of how I would see discipline being enacted. Um, I certainly have my own experiences and my own values around the use of technology and all those things, uh, and I would be happy to communicate those. But what's more important, I think, is to be able to develop shared norms around what those things entail in a school community, and to recognize in discussion that we're not going to be developing a perfect system because such a system doesn't exist, uh, but to make commitments as adults in a school to one another about these norms, and to recognize that it's important that they be fair, and to commit to those. I think is what I would seek to do as a school leader.
Thank you. The next question says, what is your vision, or what thoughts or ideas do you have for bringing a sense of joy, compassion, empathy for each other, and unity to the middle school at the student level, staff level, and for the whole school?
Thank you for that question. I think one of the things um, that I consistently experienced within myself this year is a wish for more joy. Um, um, when I was in school, I felt like there was a dearth of the kind of celebration that enlivens the culture of a school. I think these celebrations happened. They happened here and there, but they weren't consistent. Um, and so I have a lot of ideas for how to celebrate people. The public address system is a fantastic way to have shared celebrations on a regular basis in a way that honors the work of not only adults but students in the building. I was always surprised when I learned through the school grapevine or by having conversations with students or teachers about the accomplishments that students were engaged in outside of school. And it wasn't surprising to me that students did those things. It was just surprising that those things weren't really brought to the school. Um, One of the things I mentioned earlier that I really love about uh, this age of students, middle school students, is their willingness to be goofy, their willingness to be joyous, um, and I was I was wanting to have opportunities for that to be practiced in the school setting in a way that actually added, not detracted to the learning environment. Having regular spirit weeks, for example, where students have the opportunity to dress up on certain days in pajamas or whatever it is. Those are small gestures that just create an environment of joy. I think as a school leader, I would bring joy and celebration on a regular basis, whether it was through engaging and interacting with students in the classroom setting, on the whole school setting, but really enacting those things as part of how we live and how we engage in the development of culture. We all have a need to celebrate, to identify things that are positive, and to recognize them as positive. And in doing that, you also create it. It creates more positivity, and so it's a real win-win, I believe, to be engaged in doing that. And it's it was one of my a very common experience that I had, wishing for more of that, and unfortunately, I think that was a shared experience that many people in the building shared. And there was certainly plenty to be joyous about and to celebrate. One of the things that's difficult about that is to do it. It takes planning and it takes follow through by adults in order to make sure that it's done in a way that's appropriate and safe and fun for all. And so to prioritize that, to bring that to the forefront, is one of the things that I would seek to do in terms of really developing a culture that's supportive of learning, but also supportive of engagement. And I think that engagement really needs to be brought through various methods. And an important part of that is by bringing fun. And I would really enjoy bringing more of that.
Thank you. As principal, communication with families, students, and teachers is key. How will you communicate effectively with each of these stakeholders?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to experience this year at middle school is the need for those things. I felt like there were really important things, ideas, principles, but also really important celebrations that should have been shared, could have been easily shared with the entire school community that weren't. And so one of the things I've thought into quite a bit and have already began enacting and practicing on developing and creating templates for is regular communication from the principal's office in the form of a newsletter to the school community. I think having a regular and continual communication that parents could rely upon as a way to get information about what's going on in the school, and as a way to share in the celebrations of certain things, and also to hear about the growth and progress that we're working on and experiencing as a professional group of educators, I think is really important. I think communicating, I think that communication in the form of a regular newsletter would be something that would have the audience not only of parents, but also as students as well. I think having regular announcements on the public address system in a way that respected learning times and learning, but also in a way that gave information to students about important things would be important. And I think really being creative about utilizing some of the communication methods that we have at our disposal. There are some monitors in the lobby that I think could be utilized more effectively to communicate important ideas. There's an opportunity to have announcements when you have all the students in the cafeteria, all the seventh graders and one moment, and the eighth graders after that. I think there are a lot of ways to really leverage the opportunities that do exist to communicate. And I think not only having regular communications and effective communications, but really creating those systems and conventions so that teachers and adults and students could reliably understand that there are some communications that they can rely upon that are going to be happening on a regular basis. And I think in the absence of that, what you experience is a lot of confusion and a lot of tension and anxiety, because if there's an event that's happening, let's say next week, and there isn't an understanding about when communication about that event will be received, and if it's not done in a way that's proactive, and it's not done in a way that is respectful of all the changes that people have to manage in a building, then you end up really undermining the ability of adults to do their job, and of people to do their job, not only as teachers but also as students. And so regular communications about expectations, about norms, but also about the challenges and successes that we're facing. It's my hope that if I'm given the opportunity to be the principal at the school, that all the parents in the community will experience communications from me about my thoughts and my hopes and wishes, and also the recognitions of the challenges that we're facing on a regular basis, so that it becomes a collective mission that we're all engaging in and that we're all working on in order to improve the school community for the benefit of all students.
Thank you. How do you foresee your leadership style influencing teacher instruction, and how have you supported teachers in meeting the needs of all students?
So I'm a very collaborative leader. And what that means to me is that I don't have the belief that I understand or know the solutions or the best way to do things. I do feel like if I was put in almost any situation, I could come up with solutions for those things. But my commitment to collaboration as a leader means that at the very basis, the very fundamental of my leadership has to do with respecting the expertise and the experience of others. And so I wouldn't be wanting to influence teacher instruction in a specific way, but I would work very hard to engage and develop a shared vision of what is good teaching in this community, in this school, in this setting, and how that should be enacted. And once those things are developed in a collective way, then you have the opportunity to really then I would have the opportunity to really bring my leadership to bear on making sure that there's fidelity with that. And so in my role as Dean of Students this year, it was often challenging because I wasn't in the leadership role, and I didn't have the opportunity to really be as collaborative or as supportive as I would have liked to have been a number of times, because I was supporting the vision that existed and that was being communicated from the leadership. And sometimes that was genuinely frustrating, not only for myself in the role of Dean of Students, but also I think for teachers who were recognizing a need and perhaps in conversation with myself, recognizing a way to address that need, but maybe not necessarily feeling empowered to do that in a way that that was supported throughout the school. And so I think to answer that question, I think it's important to recognize that my collaborative leadership style is one that would seek to bring shared understanding about what is effective teaching, and to bring that to bear in a way that that was supported throughout the school, and to create support and accountability in a way that enables all teachers in the community to really enliven their role in that part of that learning for the benefit of the whole school. And so so I look forward to being able to engage and really have the opportunity to hear those needs from teachers and students alike, and to be able to, in some cases, communicate that how those needs and fit into our shared vision of how we're engaging in improvement, and to really support the development and creation and engagement of methods that will allow that to be enlivened in the entire school. And I think that's at the heart of what I seek to do, is to create partnership between the administration and the faculty in a way that allows all of us to really bring our efforts together, and to really work together as a team. And I think there's tremendous capacity in the faculty that's present at the school to do that. There's tremendous expertise, and there's tremendous and genuine goodwill. And I think when you have those things, it really speaks to the potential that I see in the school, and something I'm genuinely excited for. I feel strongly, actually, that with support, with collaborative guidance and leadership, and with a willingness to be a learner, and to enact that as a lead learner, I feel genuinely excited and hopeful about the kinds of growth that can happen at Amherst Middle School with my leadership.
Thank you. Please discuss steps you may have taken or will take to include restorative practices at the middle school.
Thank you. Earlier I spoke about the importance of having middle school be a time of learning, and I think that's the framework through which I see every aspect of the middle school experience for students, and I think it's also at the heart of how I envision and see restorative practices existing in the school setting. I had the opportunity this year as Dean of Students to really lead on the implementation of restorative practices. And what I mean by that is just that clear idea that discipline has to be an opportunity for us to learn from our mistakes, because all of us make mistakes. And when we have the opportunity to understand how those mistakes impact a community, and to offer our energies in reparation of those offenses that we may have committed, then it gives us an opportunity to turn something that could be otherwise, in a different paradigm, just a time of castigation or a time of being singled out, and not experiencing learning, but perhaps developing resentment and those kinds of things. I think that does a tremendous amount of negativity to a community. Just like anything, that is involved in the development of social capital, like getting in trouble, punishment, those kinds of things. Um, there's a real opportunity in the correct application of discipline policies to actually grow and increase not only the kindness but also the genuine goodwill that is present in a community. Um, I know that as a dean, I made mistakes. I know that in my experience as a teacher, I have made mistakes, and I know that if I'm afforded the opportunity to be the principal, I will also make mistakes. And it's a commitment that I have to myself, and not only in my professional life but also in my personal life, to recognize that making mistakes is part of being human, and one of the most human things I've found to do is to admit when I have a mistake and to make a genuine commitment to myself to not repeat that mistake because I understand how that mistake may have impacted others. Um, and so I would really seek to broaden the reach of restorative justice and restorative principles, not only in the discipline at Amherst Middle School, but also enact it in every corner of the school and in the classrooms and in the hallways, because I think it's very important that we have an opportunity to experience accountability as a growth experience and as something that is actually nurturing, not just something that is um, um, painful and difficult to experience. And to the extent that I've been able to do that as dean, I've certainly tried to do that imperfectly, and have a lot of ideas about how I could have been better at that work, and was constantly trying to grow from those. But I don't I don't think it could be underestimated how valuable, and the other side of it, how damaging it can be when a young person, particularly someone who's genuinely learning something, is punished without the opportunity to have that be a learning experience. I think it's very damaging. And I think we can see this um, present in a lot of our systems that we have across the country that have to do with discipline and the supposed uh, implementation of what's often called justice. And I think the value in restorative justice is that it actually recognizes the short and long term impacts of how justice has been implemented in a way that values all community members, and recognizes the role that we all have to play in the development of community.
Thank you. The next question has many parts.
Okay.
After I ask these questions, I will move to the questions in the chat. So the first part says, can you give an example of a change you have led in one of your schools? What strategies did you use to engage staff and teachers and to bring people through the process? We'll start there.
Okay. That wasn't too many parts. I could. I'll
There are
take
more.
that.
There are more
Okay.
parts.
Okay. So I'll start with those. I had the real privilege in Southern California to work at a school that, as head of the middle school, that was specifically trying to address a very underserved population in the community, and one of the things that we recognized was that these students, in order to become part of the school, you had to have been expelled from the school district, and it was a very large school district in Southern California. and so there were unfortunately a lot of students who found themselves in that role, and we recognized early on that these students were not generally experiencing success in the classroom setting. And so we really wanted to be thoughtful and purposeful about how we brought learning to these students. Um, and so as part of that, we spent a great deal of time in conversation with teachers at the school, and we explored different things that were happening educationally in different communities, and we settled upon project-based learning as a way to upend the kind of normal paradigms that existed in the kind of didactic classroom setting that a lot of the students hadn't been successful in before. But we knew that project-based learning was a very difficult reform to implement because it does fundamentally uh, uh, um, address or change the paradigm of teacher as giver of knowledge and student as receiver of knowledge, which is a paradigm that, to be fair, many of us who are educators have been brought up under. And of course, we bring that to our experience as educators as well, our experience as students. And it just so happens that many of us who are educators were successful students. And so it's sometimes harder for us to understand or to empathize with students who aren't successful because that wasn't our experience. And that was certainly the case in this setting. And so once we settled upon project-based learning as a way to try and address and significantly alter the way instruction was delivered in the classrooms, we knew that implementing that would be another difficult thing. I remember working with very successful teachers who said, "Oh yeah, I do project-based learning already because at the end of a unit, students have to create a poster." And so there were all these assumptions that were in place about what project-based learning is. I won't go into the details of it, but I'll just briefly summarize it in saying that in project-based learning, the project becomes a vehicle for learning, and through the enacting and the through the project itself, the learning happens. So instead of, for example, having a unit on democracy, you might work with students to develop a voter registration drive. And through the work of developing a voter registration drive, students are going to end up learning a lot of the same things that they would learn if they were sitting in class and reading books and documents and hearing lectures about the history of democracy and voting, but they're doing that based on the work of developing this project. At the same time, they're also developing collaborative skills and leadership skills and all these and citizenship skills and all these soft skills that that have tremendous value not only in communities but in workplaces these days. And so thankfully, we had a lot of support from the district, and we had the opportunity to work over weeks in the summer on really understanding and developing capacities in teachers around what was and what wasn't project-based learning. And there was a lot of learning that took place on the part of teachers. And once we were able to develop clear and shared understandings of what project-based learning was and wasn't, then we had the tools at our disposal ready to help us begin to implement this kind of learning with our students. But then it was important to really make sure that this was met on an ongoing basis in a way that allowed all this energy that was being built up and all this excitement that was being generated over the summer, that it allowed it to have life. And so in my role as a middle school leader, I had the opportunity to become trained in and to deliver regular professional development to the faculty about project-based learning. But I think one of the most important things was that we developed a practice of using certain protocols so that teachers had the opportunity in a protocol setting had the opportunity to share their progress, their insecurities, and their triumphs with one another in a setting on a regular basis that allowed them to get useful and constructive feedback on where they felt they were falling short. And so these systems had to be developed, but they also had to be carried on over an extended amount of time. And it was actually really amazing and work that I'm very proud of, that the school was able to implement over a relatively short amount of time, and by that I mean a couple years, a very strong capacity and culture of project-based learning that was able to dramatically improve and address some of those same achievement gap issues that we talked about earlier in this conversation, by giving students the opportunity to work with teachers who were engaged in continual professional growth and professional development, and to celebrate those triumphs with one another, to communicate those out regularly to the community, and to involve the community in being able to see the work, the fantastic work that was being done by students that hadn't really had the experience of being quote unquote successful in a school setting, and so if any one of those things weren't present, if it wasn't regularly reinforced, if there wasn't agreed upon norms and practices that the teachers in the school felt were had a shared feeling of being critical to this growth, if all those things weren't present, then you wouldn't have had that kind of success. And I'm very proud of the fact that success continues, and that the school has had for a number of years tremendous growth based on this implementation of project-based learning that continues to impact the way it's happening at that school.
Thank you. You seem to have addressed the other two parts of the question, so I will move on to some of the questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
We have one that says, it says, do you believe that a principal should know all the students' names and how they are pronounced? Also, what percentage of students do you know?
Yeah, that's a difficult question in the sense that, one of the things that was my experience at the middle school this year was that in August when I arrived, there were nearly 500 people that I hadn't met before, and I think it was a really difficult thing for me personally to get to know all the students, particularly because I was often viewing students in the from the perspective and the view of the dean, and working intensively with some students and not at all with other students. I do think it's a justified and valuable goal for a school leader to know all the students in a school, and I would certainly want to do that, and I would seek to do that, and I would admit to probably making mistakes around doing that. Even there were a number of times when there were students who I knew, and either because it was a name I wasn't terribly familiar with, or it was a name that was or someone who I hadn't spoken to in a while, I wouldn't immediately recall that name, and at times it would be frustrating for me, and certainly apparently from students as well. But I think that's an admirable. That that'd be a really valuable goal. I can also say that one of the things that's a very strong influence on me is has to do with my first job as a teacher. Um, when I was in my mid 20s, I started teaching, and I was a teacher at a school in California. There was a high school, and I had the really good fortune to work with a principal named Arlando Smith, who's still a mentor and a friend. And one of the things that I found most inspiring about him was, besides the fact that he spent so much time with me as a new teacher, helping me understand what my role as a teacher was and engaging me in conversations, and he seemed to have endless amounts of time for me, even though he had so many demands on him. But it was the fact that he walked around the school and he did know every single student, and this was a school that was much bigger than. Granted, it had 4 grades. It was a high school, but it had about 1,200 students, and he knew every single student and had developed relationships with many of the students, and that left a really powerful impression on me. Um, and I also remember how successful he was at communicating with students and really being able to carry through and carry forward with those conversations. And so, um, one of the things that I have made as a commitment to myself is that if I'm given the opportunity to be the principal at the school, is that I would spend time studying the yearbook and getting to know all the students in the school, so that I could really be able to speak to all of them and not say excuse me or whatever, but actually address them by name. And um, I think that's a fair expectation, and one that I would work to meet. Um, one of the funny things that happened this year is that so my first name is Diego. I think you could see that on the screen right here. Um, but because I was dean, there were a number of students who called me Dean Sharon, and I think a lot of people thought that my first name was Dean. Um, and so from time to time, I still get called Dean by people within the school, and that's kind of a funny thing. And it's one of the things that always makes me laugh. Um, but anyway, yes, I would love to know every student's name.
Thank you. So we have another student who said, what would you change about the middle school, if anything?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of change that's happening, that's not coming from within, but that's coming from without. And so I think to a certain extent, trying to keep as much about the middle school uh, that we value, but really working hard to try and change the things that don't serve us is an important part of the work that I would like to try and do. I think I would like to make it a place that feels safe for all students. I would love to make it a place where kindness is something that we all express to one another, and I would really like to make it a place where everyone feels comfortable in every part of it, uh, and the students who have a hard time with that have the recognition that there are places and adults that they can reach out to in order to feel safer and more secure, and also to feel supported in all those things. And so there's a lot of things that I think are really good about ARMS and what happens there, and certainly the students are an important part of that. But I think just amplifying the good and trying to work on making sure that the kindness rings through every hallway is an important part of what I would want to bring. Um, so yeah, and that's a lot.
Thank you. We have 9 minutes left in our time that we have told the community that we would have this meeting. And there are quite a few questions. I will get to one that says, how accessible will you be during the day for students to come and talk to you about issues they have?
That's a great question. One of the things that I would like to do is to, um, you know, certainly as principal and in any role that you play in the school, there are certainly times when you can't be available for students. But what I would like to do is to have regular office hours so students know, hey, these are the 3 or 4 times a week when I know I can walk into the principal's office and be heard. And so again, communicating those, making those available to everyone, so that it's understood, and being consequent in following through with being present for those times is something that I plan to do.
Thank you. We have the question, what identity do you want ARMS to have district-wide, citywide, statewide?
That's an interesting question. I like it. I feel like I would like ARMS to be known as a school where all students are valued, where kindness is an important part of the culture, and where students are challenged in a way that allows them to reach reach further, to try harder, but also supported in a way that makes them feel successful. And so for me, I think the those things will go a long way. It's also really important to me that ARMS is a school that is fair, where fairness is an important value, and I think that's an important part of kindness that maybe I haven't stated as explicitly as I would like. Um, I think it's natural and developmentally appropriate for middle school age students to lament the lack of fairness, but I also think that they are often speaking to things that are real and appropriate for them to speak to when they're talking about things not being fair. And so I think being a place of learning, being a place where kindness is valued, and being a place that's fair is how I would like our school to be known. But also, I think a place that's fun. I had a lot of conversations with students this year, um, and in many cases, very successful students who were eighth graders, and who had been there, and some of them didn't look forward to coming to school, and and I found that very sad. I want the school to have a reputation as being a fun place as well, a place where students look forward to coming to, and a place where they look forward to coming to because they have opportunities to demonstrate who they are, and to grow, but also where they have opportunities to have fun, and that's something that's really important to me as well.
Thank you. There's a question, how do you see the role of paras and how would you support their work?
Thank you for that. I developed a tremendous amount of respect for paras this year in my work at the middle school. And so how do I see their role? I see it as absolutely essential and critical. Um, and I think, one of the things that is really important to support their work is to really listen to what their needs are, to really understand how to support it from an administrative point of view, and also to develop that same kind of dialogue that allows for those shared values and that shared sense of purpose to be developed by all the adults, including paras, in the context of a school. There were a number of times when I was involved in engaging students about their interactions with paras, and I found that there were opportunities to engage restorative practices in those contexts that allowed paras to feel like they were as valued as they should be in the context of the school. Honestly, there is so much important work that happens at ARMS that could not be done without the work of paras, and so to properly put that in context and to support that work, I think is really essential. And to give paras ownership of what that work looks like, and to develop practices that we agree are essential to their success as paras, but also as professionals in the building, is an important part of that. And I think to the extent that's done collaboratively, will really support the success of all parts of the school.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sharon, for telling us about yourself, your beliefs, and your qualifications for this position. And thank you all for joining this forum. Once again, the session was recorded and will be available for viewing at a later time. We will return tomorrow, Thursday, May 7th at 11:30 to hear from our next candidate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you all of you for tuning in and for the questions. And I look forward to continuing to work in the community for the sake of all students and their families. Thank you, Doreen, for the conversation.
Take care. Be safe and stay healthy.
I appreciate that. Same to you.